Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship. In this video, we're going to go over velocity banking from a beginner's perspective. So if you've never heard of velocity banking, this is the perfect video from you. This is called Velocity Banking Getting Started. So let's answer a few basic questions. And if you don't know, or if you didn't know, advanced mastery of anything is just doing the basics over and over again, right? So, what is velocity banking? All it is a debt payoff strategy using lines of credit as your main tool, right? As your main tool. That's all velocity banking is. Debt payoff strategy and philosophy using lines of credit as your main tool. And what do you need to do it, right? So in order to do velocity banking, you just need two things. Number one is a budget, and number two is a line of credit. Okay, so the budget is going to be your essentially your attack plan because again you're going to list all your debts. We're going to pay off on a certain order to maximize something called your cash flow, and we're going to use a line of credit to help us do it. So if you don't know what a line of credit is, all it is a financial tool where you could borrow money, pay it back, and use it over and over again. So there's three main types of lines of credit. There's the personal line of credit, there's the home equity line of credit, and there's a credit card, right? So if you have a credit card, you already have a line of credit, even though you may have never heard that term. I had a friend who actually owns real estate in Los Angeles, and he was like, "What's a line of credit?" Right? So, some people may not be familiar with that term, but in this case, we're going to use something called a home equity line of credit as our main tool. Now, what is the strategy? So let's go over the strategy. The strategy is that number one, our line of credit is our main operating account. So unlike your average American whose main operating account is the checking account, the line of credit is going to be our main operating account. And then what do we do with our line of credit? We put our entire paycheck into, and I'll call it LOC, line of credit, and then we take out expenses from LOC, line of credit. That's all the strategy is. And you might be like, really? It's that simple? Yes, it is that simple. I'll tell you what the hardest part of doing this strategy is. It's knowing when to get the line of credit and not being fearful that you're going to put your entire paycheck into that line of credit, because putting your entire paycheck into that line of credit means you're going to have something called zero savings, which is what the opposite of how we're trained to do our banking, right? So that's the opposite. And here's the funny thing, right? When you get a line of credit, you have to get it before you ever need it, right? And this is why it's important to get educated, learn about how the banks and credit works, because when is the best time to get credit? When do banks lend you money? When you don't need it, right? So when people are in a jam because of debt, they're like, "Oh my goodness, I love this strategy, but I can't get a line of credit." Exactly. You can't get a line of credit because banks don't lend money to people who need it. And if you want to see all the lines of credit that I have, I actually took a snapshot of all the lines of credit that I have, and I have, if you sum this up, $258,000 in credit limits, but luckily you only need one as your main operating account. And so you usually want to use the one with the biggest limit and the lowest interest rates, and Helocs usually fit into that category. But these are all the lines of credit that I have, over $258,000. So if I have, let's say, a fix and flip rehab project ready to work on, I don't need to borrow money, or I guess I'm borrowing money from the bank, but I don't need to get like a hard money loan. But I might do a mix of both. But what I'm saying is that I got all this credit, $258,000 before I ever needed it, right? And you should do the same too. Now, let's go back here. So what do we need to do it? Number one is the budget. And so you could just create a simple Excel sheet like this. So we have a budget right here. And then, so $5,000 of income, $4,000 of expenses, and then we do an expense breakdown. So we can see we have 3 credit cards, an auto loan, and a mortgage, right? And we have a line of credit as our main operating account. So let's assume we have a $40,000 line of credit at a 10% interest rate. And then if I go back here, what is the actual strategy? Yes, the line of credit's our main operating account. So we have something called a home equity line of credit. And if you've never heard it, think of it as like a credit card based on the value of your home, right? If you have something called equity, if you don't know what that is, look it up in Google. You're able to almost get something like a credit card that you can use based on your home value, right? And the cool thing about a Heloc, home equity line of credit, is you can use it to pay anything. Like I can use it to pay credit cards, loans, mortgages, but I can't do that with the credit card, right? I can't pay credit card one with credit card two. I can't pay credit card one with the auto loan, but I can use my home equity line of credit to pay any of these, right? And so let's go back here. So what's the actual strategy is we're going to put the entire paycheck into the line of credit and then take our expenses out of the line of credit. And it's like, whoa, is that it? Is that simple? Yes, it is. And I'm going to show you how on day one, we're going to increase something called cash flow. So we're going to assume two things, that we have this exact same income and we're going to do the exact opposite of most people, which is have zero savings, right? So if I go in here and put my entire paycheck into that line of credit. Now, this line of credit doesn't have a balance right now, so we're going to do a little bit of financial re-engineering, okay, and use our main line of credit as our main operating account. And what we're going to do is have something called cash flow. So zero savings, but we have cash flow, and we're going to maximize this number on day one, right? So we have these three credit cards, and let's move these three credit cards to our home equity line of credit, right? Some people might say, oh my goodness, that's so dangerous because your home is in danger if you don't pay it off. But here's the thing, that's also true if you don't pay off your mortgage, right? If you don't have the money to put into the home equity line of credit, you pretty much don't have the money to pay the mortgage, if you get what I mean. So I don't know, for some reason people think, oh, like, yeah, if you have a home equity line of credit, your home's in danger, but for some reason they don't use the same logic with the mortgage, right? So let's go ahead and move these three credit cards. So that's $30,000 of credit card debt into that home equity line of credit. So we're just doing a simple debt transfer. We're not getting rid of the debt yet, okay? But look at what happens when we do that. Zero, zero, zero. Oh my goodness. We went from $767 of savings every single month. We went to zero savings and we magically made this number into 1700. Okay? 1700 in one swoop without doing anything, right? Because we're going to make what we're going to do the velocity banking strategy, which is putting our entire paycheck into that line of credit, right? And it's going to do two things. It's going to satisfy the minimum monthly payment, so that minimum payment doesn't really matter anymore, and it's going to minimize the interest because the interest is calculated by the average daily balance. And then after every single month, it's going to go down by 1700, right? It's going to go by 1700 plus the interest. So let's go ahead and calculate that. So let's go ahead and do this, and then let's go ahead and calculate the next month's balance, which is the previous month's balance plus the previous month's interest minus 1732.57. Okay, and then let's actually zoom this in so you can see a little bit better. But to calculate the interest, all it is based on the average daily balance. So get the average of these two numbers right here, multiply it by the interest rate. So that's 0.1, 10%, 10% right here. And then you divide by 12 to get the monthly interest, right? And then so now all you got to do is just copy and paste, right? So copy and paste until this sucker goes to zero. And let's see how long it takes. 19 months. Okay, so 19 months to pay off those three credit cards. And let's go ahead and highlight this. And so 19 months, okay. And how many credit cards were there? Or how much was the total debt? It was $30,000. So 19 months for 30K. Okay, so 30K of debt, 19 months. Not bad, right? And now we got to figure out what the balance of the auto loan is after 19 months. So if you want to look at an amortization schedule, or you could use one of those financial calculators, go to calculator.net. So let me go in here, calculator.net amortization, and then we can figure out what the balance of that car loan is. We just got to put in the loan amount, 5 years at 4% interest rate, right? I think that's correct. So let's take a look here. Okay, 4%. And then it's going to tell us after 19 months what the balance of that loan is. So 19 months, let's take a look here. and that will be 14 grand. So we just got to copy this 14 grand here. And I know I'm going a little bit fast, but you know, if you think I'm going a little bit too fast, just pause the video. So 14 grand. And then what's the balance of the mortgage, right? So we just do the exact same thing, $200,000. So $200,000 at 30 years, and then 6%. And then what's the balance of that mortgage after? Here we go. 19 months. I keep forgetting because I have a memory of a fish. It's going to be 196. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that here. Now, what we have to decide is there's actually a certain debt payoff order. Okay, we're going to decide, are we going to pay off the auto loan first or the mortgage? And I will always say, in pretty much every single video, I have not seen an exception to this, that the mortgage is always last, because the payment is so small compared to the balance, right, that it's actually inefficient to pay this one off first. Whereas if you take a look at this one, you pay 14 grand to get $360 back. 14 grand to get $360 back. But you have to pay $196,000 to get $1,200 back, right? That's why we pay this one off last, because there's not enough bang for your buck. Whereas this one, you get 14 grand, you get 360, so you get a lot more bang for your buck, right? So if you've never heard of that concept, it's called the cash flow index, and there's an actual formula to it. But let's actually calculate the formula. So it's the statement balance divided by the monthly payment, so equals 14093.15 divided by 368.33, right? And then this one is 196041.93 divided by 1199.1, right? So if you take a look here, these numbers have a significance to them, and the lower the number, that's basically the one you want to pay off. And you know, if it's like below 50, it's considered inefficient. Where it's above 100 or if it's above 50, then that's kind of the one you want to pay off later, right? Like, here's the other thing too. It doesn't mean never pay off the mortgage, because if you take a look at a loan amortization schedule, and let's say for a $200,000 mortgage, after 30 years, how much are you paying? So the loan amount is 200,000, but the total interest is more than 100%, 231,000, right? Isn't that crazy? Think about if your home value doubled in 30 years. Like, you had a $400,000 home, right? Let's put 400,000. And then it valued to 800, it doubled in value to $800,000. Guess what? You lost because assuming that what do you call it? Closing costs and all that aren't taken into account, you lost, because if this $400,000 turned to $800,000, guess what? The amount that you pay in the interest will supersede the home value appreciation, right? Okay, so that's why we have to pay off this loan early, but we just pay it off last. Now let me go back here. Okay, so let's go ahead and dump this auto loan into that line of credit. Okay, so if we do that here, we're gonna put this 14 grand into that home equity line of credit. Okay, and then once we do that, you see that the balance of the loan is 13,154.7, or the line of credit, I'm sorry. But guess what happens to our cash flow? Okay, this goes to zero, and now our cash flow is 2,100.9. So that's kind of like the goal of this exercise, is to make sure we have zero savings and to maximize this cash flow number. After every single month, believe it or not, I think for the past couple of years, maybe 2 years or so, I've always had a big fat consistent zero in my checking account statement. You don't find even $1 in my checking account, zero, right? And I don't think I even have I do have a savings account because my credit union forced me to get it, but it's just a bare minimum savings, but it doesn't move. Like, I don't put more money into the savings account like Dave Ramsey would encourage you to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and now calculate this, our payoff, with our new cash flow, which is minus 2,100.9. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do this. and figure out how long it takes to pay off that car loan, and it's going to be 26 months. All right, so it's cool. 26 months to pay off 46, I'm sorry, it's 50K. 50K, right? Because the car loan original balance is 50K. Now we got to figure out, okay, after 26 months, um, what's our last loan we got to pay off? It's that mortgage, right? And let's find out what the loan amortization of that mortgage is. So 200,000 at 6% for 30 years, and then we're going to go in here, and it's $196,000. 196. So let's go back here. 196,000. No, let me redo this. This is 26 months, not 19 months. So let's go to 26 months, and it's 194. I'm sorry. I was like, it's 196. No, after all that time, it's 194. Now, we have two options here, right? What we can do is with our cash flow, put that money into our savings and not into our line of credit and just pay off the mortgage directly, right? But let me ask you this. Will most people do that? The answer is no. Most people are afraid to pay off loans early because they need that liquidity. They need that savings, right? So what you can do almost as a substitute for that is just transfer pieces of the debt into the line of credit and put your entire paycheck in there, expenses out, and you don't have to exactly calculate to the T how much is going to be overpaid to that loan, right? When you directly overpay a loan, you pretty much have to calculate to the T how much you're going to directly put in. Whereas with the line of credit, you don't have to be exact if your figures are not precise, right? And that's why I like using a line of credit as our main operating account, even in case of a lower interest mortgage and a higher interest line of credit, right? I think of it as a seatbelt. That makes sense. If you don't get what I said, just forget this part. But let's just say this. How long does it take to get from 194 to 184K in a 30-year amortization schedule? So if you just keep making that monthly payment, and you could almost substitute monthly payment with the minimum payment, right? How long is it going to take to go from 194 to 184? Let's take a look at this. 194, so it's almost about a year. And then, oh my gosh, that's like 2 years. And then that's 3 years. And it's like, we'll say 3.5, right? So let's just move 10K into the line of credit and see how long it takes us to pay it off, plus 10000. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. And let me do this. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 months. And what was it? We took like 3 years or something like that. Well, it's ridiculous, right? And here's a crazy thing. This is what I call the poor man's calculation, because we're not taking into account the monthly payment applied to every month in addition to the principal payoff when it's moved to the line of credit, right? And luckily, if you ever want to, let's say, learn with us, right? One of the sources that we learn from is Renatus, because this is where I originally learned velocity banking from in 2017, and they have this cool calculator of how long you'll take us to pay off an amortized loan, even if the line of credit is at a higher interest rate, right? So if you get access to this calculator, and you only get access if you're a Renatus student, and full disclosure, I actually make commission from selling Renatus products, right? I'm an independent contracting marketer. That's what they call us. This is where I originally learned velocity banking from. So if I go in here and just type in the numbers, it's going to tell me how long it's going to take to pay off the loan in its current form. So what I got to do is just put in this 194 number, 194, interest rate 6, 30 years, and then the payment amount is 1199.1. So I just fill it in, 1199.1. and then we're going to have a 10% line of credit. Now, this chunk amount, if you don't know what that means, that just means how much are you transferring to the line of credit. And it doesn't have to be that much, right? An amount that's sizable to, let's say, your paycheck should be sufficient, and you don't want to make it too big, right? So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So let's go ahead and put this here, $5,000 income, and then our expenses are everything except for the loan we're paying off, so it's just a $1,700 here. So $1,700, okay? And so let's say we only move $5,000 to the line of credit. It goes to zero. We rinse and repeat over and over again, right? So $5,000. Let's take a look at this. 5.9 years to pay off this loan, and then $37,000 of interest. Okay? So 5.9 years, $37,000 of interest. And we potentially saved $168,000. Like if you look at the traditional amortization schedule, right? We're just making the monthly payment and not anything more than that, that's gonna be $37,000. Now, let's say I bump this up to $10,000. So 10, well, actually, let's do this. So let's say we have a $5,000 credit card, right? And we're using a service like Plastique, and let's say it's 30%, okay? 5.9 years, 37,000. Now, if I use a 30% credit card, it's 6 years and 42,000, right? It's just a couple grand more if you want to use a credit card. And you'll get rewards points and all that good stuff. But I would always use a lower interest rate of line of credit for this. Now, let's say we move this to $10,000 to the line of credit and then pay it off to zero and rinse and repeat over and over again. So it's 5.9 years, 37,000. Now let's do $10,000. It's pretty much the same thing, right? But let's say that we put this entire thing, just 194 into the line of credit. We free that $1,199 in cash flow. So 194,486.51. 6.9 years, it takes longer, and the interest is doubled. And so it's lower than what we were going to pay. But if we just did $5,000 or $10,000 chunks, so let's do 5,000, we pay much less and it's faster, right? So don't just assume, oh, moving everything into the line of credit is a good idea. We have to be strategic about it, right? I don't know if you remember the early 2000s president, George W. Bush. He would always use this word called strategery. You got to have some strategery when it comes to paying off your debt. And so the most important thing is that cash flow or that cash flow index to figure out what the order of the debt payoff is. You could also use the traditional debt criteria, but I feel like the cash flow index is much easier to implement. Okay, so all right, well that's it for today. So let's go over a quick review. What is velocity banking? It's a debt payoff strategy using lines of credit as your main tool. And actually, let me do this. 5.9 years is the debt payoff, right? So now what we got to do is 26 divided by 12 plus 5.9. So that's 8.07 years, 250K debt free, right? So here's the thing, most people are like, oh my goodness, I would love to be mortgage free in 8 years. But not only are we mortgage free, we're auto loan free, we're credit card debt free, we're everything debt free, including the paid off home after 8 years. And now our cash flow is 3,300, and we're gonna have so much savings that we don't even know what to do with it. And now we gotta feel like, oh my goodness, you're gonna have what we call rich people problems, right? You ever notice that rich people, if they have like a ton of money in their bank account, they get nervous about it because like I'm losing to inflation, right? That's why they always try to quote put their money to work, right? So you're gonna have rich people problems and not poor people problems where you're saddled with debt. Like, oh my goodness, what do I do now, right? So let's go back to here. So what is velocity banking? It's a debt payoff strategy or philosophy, you want to call it, using lines of credit as your main tool. What do you need to do it? You need a budget and you need a line of credit. What's the strategy? Line of credit is your main operating account. You put your entire paycheck in the line of credit, take your expenses out of line of credit, rinse and repeat over and over again. You want to maximize this cash flow number, right? Maximize that cash flow number, pay off debt in a certain order, and then win at life because you paid off your debt in 8 years, whereas everybody else, they're struggling and still paying off a mortgage after 52 years because they decide that they're going to refinance after a bank sends them a letter every 5 to 7 years, right? All right, well, that's it for today. Just another beginner basic video about getting started in velocity banking. So hopefully this was not too much information. I remember when I first learned it, it actually took me 8 months, 8 months to understand the strategy, even though it's so simple at its core. All right, well, have a great day, everybody. Again, Korean Atlanta Mentorship sign off, and we'll speak to you soon.